Pagitt here. My commentary on social and cultural issues for today has to do with guns. I'm going to suggest that if we're going to rethink gun violence and gun usage in this country, we have to repeal and replace the language of the Second Amendment. Not so much in how it's written, but in how people understand it. The Second Amendment language reads like this: a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. While that has been taken by a lot of Second Amendment activists and gun rights activists to mean that each of us has the right to carry our own weaponry on our side or slung over our shoulder, I don't think that's what it gives us the right to at all. I believe the language was intended to mean that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state is accomplished not by each of us carrying our own weaponry, but by what we would call the National Guard. That every state, not at the federal level, but at the state level, has the right to form its own, quote, well-regulated militia. Well, that is accomplished through our current structure of the National Guard, where every governor has under the governor's disposal their own military. That's how we accomplish the Second Amendment. That's how we defend the constitutional rights of the Second Amendment, that every citizen of a state can bear arms on behalf of the state rather than the federal government. That was an important issue in 1791. It might still be an important issue for us today. But I do not think what it ever meant then or what it should mean now is that each one of us is our own militia carrying our own weaponry. We need to have a conversation that allows us to set aside the fear of violating the Second Amendment by clarifying the language, showing how it's accomplished through our current structure of state-run militaries, and then to have a conversation about guns where we can limit the use of guns, we can limit the right to carry guns, we can limit the kinds of guns that are made without violating the Second Amendment. The Constitution and the rights in the Bill of Rights are so important in this country. We do not want to regulate free speech. We do not want to regulate the other rights that are given to us in the Constitution, and we don't want to limit the Second Amendment rights. What we want to do is properly apply them. I know there's been a lot of constitutional scholars who think differently on this topic. I think that's what the Constitution argues for. A lot of other people think this way as well. And this is a conversation worth having so that we can clarify this issue and move forward. Now, there are a lot of things that we need to do in the short run. There's a lot of things we need to do in the short term, but we also need to engage this conversation about a new understanding of what rights we are given in the Bill of Rights that become our constitutional obligations to protect each other. We don't want to be just willy-nilly taking someone's rights because the determination of their psychologist or because they're put on a particular list by the government. We don't want to do that. That would be dangerous. So let's clarify that we can limit the right for any of us to carry a gun without limiting our constitutional rights, for that was never what the Constitution was giving us the right to do in the first place. So we'll have a conversation, and we should begin right now with regulating the kinds of guns that are manufactured, the kind of bullets that are made, who can carry them, where they can carry them, and what the responsibilities and the restrictions are in carrying them. I'm all for that. We should get started now. But we also need to have the longer conversation about clarifying what it means to maintain our Second Amendment rights in this country. And that is that we can have a well-regulated militia via the National Guard, accomplishing all the protections of the Second Amendment without feeling that each of us needs to become our own personal militia. The Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting guns. It has nothing to do with handguns. It has to do with how a state is going to organize for its own protection. Let's change the Second Amendment. Let's approach the Second Amendment the way it was intended to be understood. We can protect the Second Amendment by rewriting and repealing the language that's there and making it clear to everyone what it means in the 21st century to be people who protect one another's Second Amendment rights, all the while protecting ourselves from gun violence.